Hey, it is guest today, Josh Brandon, director and co-author of the most recent Shatner book, Boldy Go, getting kudos today all on Trekland Tuesdays Live, number 360. Can you believe it? With me, Dr. Trek Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland for some sanity, clarity, and the big picture, or a bigger picture in all things Star Trek. And if you're watching this later on, like on YouTube, go ahead and comment too. Make sure and subscribe for sure there. But we'll keep the conversation going as we get to it. Now, this is a crazy week. We've got cons coming up. I went over all that. If you missed last week's episode, we kind of ran through all the headlines, all the con expectations coming up. Who da thought it with the Trek Summit there? Today, though, I promised you a guest, and we're going to do it. That said, I am so thrilled, yay, to bring in Josh Brandon, Joshua to his not friends. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Larry.
I shouldn't say that. I mean, everybody acts so chummy. We met, you were very kind. We met at the San Francisco Creation Summit for the first time.
Yeah.
We're good enough to say hi and meet. And I'm still putting dots together about your career, but the thing that brought us really together is this new, and Shatner has so many books out, but this is something different. So I have a million questions. People have a million questions. Number one, how did you get in? What's your connection to Shatner? Or Bill? Did you know him before this? How did he find you? And then we'll talk about the book.
It's funny. I had met Bill Shatner on 3 separate occasions for about 20 seconds on each occasion. In 2009, our late friend Richard Arnold, who I knew through the Roddenberry family, I actually met him at Major's funeral. I'd been friendly with Rod for a number of years. He said, "Hey, can you help out at Shatner's charity horse show?" So I said, "Sure." And so I was one of the volunteers, got to meet the Star Trek cast because it was the J.J. Abrams year, and Bill came in and thanked all the volunteers. So I met him for 20 seconds. Then a few years later, one of my good friends, Jonathan Sadowski, was cast as his son on a CBS sitcom called Shit My Dad Says.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he brought us to a taping on my birthday, and my mother, who grew up in Montreal, went to McGill 20 years after Bill did, was there as well. So he brought us backstage, and Bill came backstage and introduced himself, and I met him for 20 seconds. And then in 2014,
But your mom and he had a 20-second McGill reunion.
That's right. Yeah. Very, very brief. Yeah. Which is 20 years apart, 20 seconds to meet. And then I was writing on a show called Haven on the Sci-Fi Network, and we cast Shatner as our big bad for the last 4 episodes. So we shot the show in Canada, but we wrote it in LA, which is, you can tell from my accent, is obviously not where I'm from, but it's where I live. And he came into the writer's room to meet the writers, so I met him for 20 seconds. And so with all of that in my mind, I was on a vacation, and an idea popped into my head for a book that Shatner should write, all about his life and how he overcomes obstacles, and he doesn't believe in the no-win scenario. And my wife said, "Look, you promised you wouldn't work on vacation, but I'll give you permission. You can contact somebody." And I still knew his assistant's email address. So I reached out to her. "Dear Kathleen, I don't know if you remember me. I was a writer on Haven. I have an idea for a book. Is anyone on Mr. Shatner's team taking pictures?" And I thought, I've put it out there into the universe. She says no if she doesn't reply, if he's too busy. At least I've asked the question. And she wrote back that day and said, "Hi, Josh, lovely to hear from you. I spoke with Bill. He'd like to call you tomorrow at 3. So that was the team. It was Bill. And he called, and I pitched my little heart out, and I gave him 10 to 15 minutes on what I called William Shatner's Kobayashi Maru. And I told him the ups and downs of his career. You never believe in the no-win scenario. You never give up. And there was this pause. And then he says 2 things. "I think it would be arrogant of me to tell anyone how to live. I don't have a master plan. It's not that I don't believe in the no-win scenario. It's never come up. I just keep trying. And second, what interests me more in terms of my philosophy is just finding these moments in the universe where I can commune with nature or appreciate what's around me or read and vociferously search for knowledge." And he told me this story from the 70s when he was driving along a highway in Ontario, and he saw, this is in the
It's in the book. Yes, this is one of the bits I did get to read. Yes.
Yeah, it's the first story he told me, and yet it didn't make it into the hardcover. We only put it in the afterward in the paperback, so it's new for everyone who wants to read it. And he said he saw an apple orchard that was hanging over the freeway, so he pulled up and scrumped an apple and bit into it. And he said, "Josh, in that moment, It was the perfect moment of maturation for that apple. I could hear the skin crack. I can still taste the juices flowing down my throat. And I thought, that's a perfect moment in time, a perfect connection with the universe. And I search for those every day. That's what interests me, not talking about the no-win scenario. And I just paused and I said, Bill, that's the book. And so I went from a rejection to him basically telling me what the book was going to be without realizing it. And then, a few weeks later, we were off to the races.
And when was this? What
This would have been in early 2021.
Okay, so we're coming out of the pandemic, but we're still in that mentality and everything.
That's right. So most of our meetings, most of our meetings were on Zoom because of that,
Oh, right. No, I'm saying things were starting to open up and people had been tamped down, but that mentality of
starting to come back.
Yeah, starting to come back a little bit. Well, that is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild. Well, and this was in paperback. I mean, this was hardback first, and this is the occasion. What in the spring was the paperback edition?
No, they just released it. It just came out last week, like a week ago.
Okay, very good.
You've got one of the very first copies. I got it just before.
Okay. Well, as it says with the new afterword. Well, on one hand, people would say, and then I want to get back to the process, but people would say, "Oh my God, Shatner's done another book." Well, a lot of those were fiction. They were novels. He had Tech War. He did his Kirk novels with Gar and Judy Reese-Steve. I mean, he's done that. And then he did all of his movie memories, but they're all Star Trek or they're film related. These are just like life lessons. In fact, what struck me was all these last 10, 20 years, people go to see Shatner because he's Shatner. It's not because, he played Kirk or even Denny Crane. I mean, that might be part of the mix. But it's beyond why people who are Star Trek fans say would go see. It's getting into the George Takei realm, the people who have become bigger than their Star Trek part, but you got to know them that way. But for 20 years, I know people who are newbies will go and want to hear Star Trek with Shatner. And they'll say, he had an hour and he didn't say a word about Star Trek. And that's not a bad thing if he's entertaining, people are still going to hear. But it's dawned on me, this is a book that's taking all the stuff you didn't hear that you heard when he wasn't talking about Star Trek. And because he was always so present, and it feels like wherever he goes and talks live, the first 10 or 15 minutes is what just happened to him in the 12 or 24 hours.
I know, right?
And it just struck me that that's what a lot of, this book is a highlight of a lot of that. It feels, if not, explicitly, it feels like it's that way because it's his voice. And I just want to ask you about the process, but that's what it felt like to me. And I guess that was the original inspiration. I pull over, eat an apple, and that's where the whole book came from. And it's all about those. It's organized.
That's right.
It's not a random.
It's like a collection of essays, and each is attached to a theme that's important. So there's one of them is about family, one's about animals, one's about his trip to space, one's about music when we interviewed Ben Folds and we interviewed Seth MacFarlane. And the last chapter is about what happens when he dies, because he's 93. He's very aware of all of that, and it's something that speaks to him on a regular basis. And there's a lot of Star Trek in there too, but it's not a Star Trek book. It opens with an anecdote about generations. The afterward ends with an anecdote about Star Trek: The Motion Picture. There's a lot of Star Trek in there, but it's not exclusively Trek.
Well, he, for all of he doesn't, the arc of an actor's career, they get hot with something. That's great. And then they get to the point in life where they want to be known for something, not just Star Trek or whatever the thing was that made them famous. And they want to prove to the world they're not a one-trick pony, right? And sometimes they can, and whatever happens, they may have 5 other headline, Patrick Stewart finally is Professor X, as well as a ton of Shakespeare, but it's not on film,
Right.
But there comes a part, whatever an actor's journey is, when they're blessed with something like being known for Star Trek, or even a regular recurring like John Delancey or something.
Sure.
But there comes a time when the clock is ticking and they realize that their folly for running away from it so hard, when there's so many people, if 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years go by and they're still embraced for that, it's like, why am I running away from this? What do I have to, whatever their life was. And that's why it's interesting, because he does sprinkle Star Trek in through here along with the rest of his incredible life.
Sure.
Which to me, it felt like as his age got up there and I'm watching the whole Star Trek landscape go by, as I do, especially with the backstage folks, but he's kind of hard to ignore anyway. But it's the thing about Shatner is, and especially when we watched he and Leonard kind of parallel track, they were so of a 3 to 4 days apart on birthday, and sadly Leonard had smoked and had COPD, and and his health did, go down. It was rather late, and Shatner, people keep waiting for him to get old,
I know.
air quotes. And it struck me a few years ago. I think he has somebody on staff, or maybe I think he just has a big wind up thing somewhere. And as long as that is wound, and it's an Energizer Bunny, and as long as that's going, he's fine. If anyone ever forgets to just wind him, everything in his life just stopped, he couldn't exist. And that's a clunky mechanical way of saying, I think, what he's saying in here. Talk about the bit about I think you alluded to it just a minute ago, but the bit about, I have no wisdom to give. I'm just saying.
He's just sailing along, and it seems to work for him. But you're absolutely right, and you're not far off on the wind-up doll, because he believes if he's not, as long as he's working,
yes, that's what I mean.
So he says yes a lot, and he loves to challenge himself. He had no reason to write this book. I've never written a book before. He had no reason to work with me, but he saw something in the opportunity, and he said, let's do it. And he's very proud of the fact he's never missed a day of work. He's never phoned in a performance. He really goes for everything. And I think that's his secret. I think he probably thinks if he stops, he'll die. So he's got to keep going, and he gives everything 100%. That's
it. Well, and some of the ways he and you put it, what struck me was at one point, it's in the introduction, I think, or the prelude, whatever, but he's saying, look, what he told you on your pitch day, I don't have, here's the tablets from the mountain to give wisdom to people. It's just, here's what works for me. And basically he's saying, and he had a great phrase that's gotten away from him, maybe you'll remember it, basically about just always stay curious.
Yeah.
Like, don't shut down. Always, and for him, the equivalent, I guess, of keeping the wind up wound is there's always something else to get excited about. There's always something else to find out. He doesn't want to be, caught not learning something new every day. I mean,
and he's constantly reading. He's always reading. He's figured out how to put books on his phone, and so he's always just reading. He'll get through a book a day.
Well, something I didn't know was he's a speed reader. I didn't know that. Maybe that's common knowledge, but I hadn't heard that.
No, I didn't know either, but it made sense when I remember we were doing a pre-interview on our virtual book tour, and somebody, or maybe it was during the interview, when one of the interviewers said, "Oh, what are you reading right now?" And they asked both of us, and I said I was reading this biography of Weird Al Yankovic, and Bill pulls out his phone and he goes, I'm reading this, and I'm reading, and he just rattles off like 7 books that he's just passing in and out of. So yeah, he's very, very curious, and he says, "I know nothing. It's not enough. I just want to know more."
Yes, and in that vein, it's this. And so I guess on that way, he looks at everything, whether it's going into space, into orbit, or eating, pulling over and grabbing that apple on the road. It's all the same.
An adventure
continuum to him. Yeah. It's the sensory
Absolutely.
and the experience. Well, the other story that you start with is that when he's diving for sharks on Shark Week.
At 89 he did that. Yeah, sure. You want to go swimming with sharks? They probably won't eat you. Yeah, okay.
Just the worst is, I love it. This is a sidebar. So the process for this, and so Zooming, people are familiar with that, and now we do it without it having a pandemic. But it's first person. He's talking. How did you get into that? Because it's very conversational, and I think I can hear him. We tease him about the pauses but he also has the speed, the speed pattern of just talking in bursts, which is like not the pause every 3 words.
Right.
If one of those emotions or experiences comes up, it'll just propel him for a few words and sentences, and then he'll take a second, and then he'll go on to, and that's the way the book felt. And the little italicized sub thoughts to the audience, like asides almost.
Well, that's what we were going for. Yeah, the idea is,
I was going to say, what was that to get that on with you helping?
Like Uncle Bill is having a conversation with you, and you can tell by the way that he writes and the way he speaks, he gets into something, and just bang, his mind goes like a child for a couple of minutes. And then he sort of returns to normal. So given that was how he sort of spoke when we chatted, I thought this is what we have to capture for the book. So yeah, most of it was in Zoom. We did meet up a couple of times. We had, for the epilogue, we had a fabulous time when he performed with Ben Folds and the National Symphony at the at the Kennedy Center, which was incredible. He did some
Wow.
stuff for Earth Day. And so I got to go to that, and I hung out with him backstage, and then we all hung out at a whiskey bar at the Watergate Hotel. And we're just chatting, and then I realize he's talking to some bald guy who introduces himself and says, "Hey, I'm Jeff." And I go, "Hey, I'm Josh." And then I realize it's Jeff Bezos. So I'm sort of hearing his philosophy on things, and he's gushing over Bill and the performance and everything. And so, yeah, there's some really interesting moments where I got to be in that really tight inner circle.
Well, how long did it take when you first
Probably
started?
about a year.
About a year?
Yeah, about a year. Maybe, well, a little bit longer than a year, because we had to wait for the Kennedy Center thing. We knew it was coming up. And so we said to the publisher, can we hold off a little bit longer, because we'd like to write an epilogue. And this seems like the opportunity to get another story out of it. And it was beautiful, because it all the philosophical parts of the book kind of came full circle in that one magical night, which I think people are going to see. I believe it was recorded, and they're just waiting to distribute it. So, he only performed 6 songs, but there was a lot of chatting in between, and it was a really magical night. It truly was.
I remember seeing, I think, flyby in the socials and maybe some news about it. So that's good. That's on the way. And just to be clear, you're talking about the publisher in the original edition, which was the hardback, and waiting for the epilogue. But what has just happened with the paperback?
The afterward,
you've added, and just to get our turn, you've added an afterward.
That's right.
So the hardback was out in,
I think, October 2022 was when it came out.
Okay, so basically that year. And the paperback is just out. Was that part of the plan? Was that what followed?
No, I didn't know they were going to do a paperback, but I guess the reviews were really good, and I guess it sold enough copies that they thought we should do a paperback. And when they mentioned it, we actually volunteered. Bill and I had a conversation, and I said, we'd love to give them a little bit more, tell them what's happened since the book came out, because it's been so well received, and he's doing all these other interesting things. And we thought, I'm sure people would want to hear what's up to the minute with Bill. So we snuck afterward.
I was going to say, the afterward, the newest part, he takes feels like the last third of it is like, so I'm going to do this paragraph, and I'm doing this. And it's not like this. It's more like the wonder of it, which is the thing that permeates this. It's not like, I'm doing this. Here's my checklist for everyone following at home. It's just like, isn't this amazing? Those little asides, the little italics.
And that's what we talked about. What's new? And then we talked about that line at the end of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The human adventure is only beginning, or is just beginning. And we thought that's a great way to describe everything he tries to do in his life. And so he took me through all the latest challenges and adventures. And I think, we came up with "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," because he just can't be stopped.
Well, now I didn't get to read the last chapter, but I saw the chapter headers title.
Right, gone.
And you mentioned it. The last chapter 9 is called "When I'm Gone."
Yep.
So tell everyone, what's the tone of that? What was he going for? Was it odd, or was it?
No, it's beautiful. It's bittersweet. It's melancholy. He knows he's going to die. He's got not that long to go. He doesn't know when. He said, one moment, and that will be the end of my story. And he thinks he's not thinking about the things that, people will miss him. He knows that. Some people will be glad to see him gone. Others will be very, very sad, but he's going to miss things. He's going to miss the opportunity to see his granddaughters grow up, to see his great grandson, who's now just a couple of years old. What will become of his life? He's going to miss all of the growth in technology and hopefully more space exploration and exploration of ourselves. He's going to miss those things. He's terrified of death.
So who's Clive?
Clive is now his great grandson.
Okay. Because he's ticking off. He says, my family, including my daughters, my sons-in-law, and grandchildren, has a new member. His name is Clive.
That's right. Clive.
And I thought, well, he's not but he's a great. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, is this one of his new horses? Is this one of his one of his pet, one of his dogs? Do they have a robot? Some tech company gave him a little bot drop there or whatever.
Yeah, she's the fastest, followed by Moonrise Kingdom, followed by Clive.
I don't know. What about so you said you're not an author, you're a director, and we got some directing news to talk about there, but what's been this process like for you? I mean, how nice it's received, but are you going to do another? Are you talking about doing something else with him if you have the idea? I mean, what's this project and process meant for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been a writer. I'd been a TV writer, and I,
Mhm.
sold a couple of things. But at that point in my career, I hadn't yet directed, or had I? I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, I directed my first movie, which is on Showtime. If anyone wants to see it, it's called A Thousand Little Cuts. It's also available on
Oh,
Paramount Plus, and it stars Marina Sirtis. There's another Trek connection.
there we go.
So I had done that, but I'd never written a book. But for some reason, I just felt like I somehow thought I could do this. And if he was willing to take a chance on me, that gave me a lot of confidence. And he had me write him a few pages just as a little bit of an exercise, and
Mhm.
also to see what we would be pitching people. He said, write me a few pages. If I like them, we'll see if somebody wants to buy it. And he did, and they did. So it was all just sort of spur of the moment. I'm going to ask. That's been my life. I ask questions, and if someone says yes, then great.
Does it? Well, wait. Does that track with him? He's a
Well, he likes to say
plunger
yes.
ahead, isn't he? Too. Yeah.
Yeah. He likes to ask, and he likes to explore. And a lot of the time, if someone presents him with something and it sounds interesting, he'll say yes. Work
Yeah.
out the details with my assistant.
Is that you normally, or was this
Yeah.
okay?
No, that's what I mean. Look, I moved here from Australia when I was 24. I knew that if anyone was going to give me a shot, I had to prove myself. And you don't get anywhere by sitting back and wondering, oh, I wonder if I did that, would this have happened? You go and
Mhm.
you show that you have the gumption and the ability to do it. And then if somebody says no, so what? They said no. But if someone says yes, as long as you can back it up,
Right.
you're onto something good.
I know there's a trite phrase somewhere about no's and yeses, and if they say no, you just keep going till you find the yes, or a no is just another. I don't know, but
Or
yeah, that's how
failure
you.
is success training. You can throw 1,000 cliches at it. But
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
But it works. So has this changed anything for you, the process and working with him? Like, are you going to do another one? Are you
Oh,
itching to
right.
do it, or just get back
We
to?
we are talking about something. It's interesting, Larry, because in some ways, if you read it, you should look at that and go, that should be his last book. I
Mhm.
don't know that he has anything else that will rival this in terms of philosophy and discussion of age and where he's at. But we are tinkering with an idea that might be something unique. And I think if we can nail that, then you may not have heard the last from the two of us
All
together.
right.
But I will tell you what the book has done for me. It's given me the
Yeah.
confidence that I can write more than just TV and screenplays. I'm actually writing a novel now. So very slowly on the back burner, but I am working
Mhm.
on a novel.
Just some writing that doesn't have every 10 words an italic aside to
That's right. Yeah.
in your
Which is very Shakespearean. And he grew up, he did Stratford
right.
Shakespeare Festival, because in Shakespeare there is no subtext. The characters will just have an aside and tell the audience
Mhm.
what they're thinking.
Yes. Gadzooks methinks he. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Yeah, Othello is full of that. Iago is telling one thing to Othello, and then he literally turns to the audience. He's like, "Here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to get him."
so you mentioned Bill. Have you had anyone else ask you about writing with him or working, or has it gotten
Yeah,
you any notice outside that your channel
there
with him?
was there was something. Yeah, I don't know. It still might happen. I can't say who, but
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, but I'm just
no,
saying. Yeah.
but yeah, based on the success of the book, my editor actually called me and said, "Hey, they're talking about teaming us up to write a book for blank celebrity who is not in any way related to Star Trek." So that still may happen. If it does, it does. It's nice that I guess they have the confidence in me as an author
Mhm.
to at least show interest in that, and we'll see. I was having discussions with another actor who wants to kind of tell his memoirs or life story, and that may become a thing too. So who knows? It's certainly opened up another avenue for me. I never thought I'd write a book, and now I may write several.
Well, and again, every people there sometimes there are specific skills that if they're a success, the downside is it's like the best sound designer on Broadway or in film, or the best, the creatives and the designers. The whole point is not to stand out.
Right.
Yeah, you have failed in your mission if you stick out, and yet it's like only their peers can figure, like the general public, live or on film or whatever. You've done your job by blending in, but that doesn't do anything for you to get the
That's
next
true.
job. So what I'm saying is this reads so well. I can see his attitude, if not his actual. Yeah, those times when but he could have just tape recorded stories and then transcribed them and threw it together and threw it out. So what was your contribution? Like, it's a glorified version of that, but there has to be your silent contribution, or not so silent, had to smooth all out, pick, choose, do editing decisions?
Yeah, I think it's
Let's
a lot
use
of
that,
that. I
not
think,
that. This is
yeah,
better. I
and
mean, what was that like?
Bill will tell you as well, I brought a lot of structure to it because
Mhm.
I would just set a topic and he would just go. And then it's my job to sift through everything and figure out what relates to the
Okay.
themes that we're discussing, how to sort of sew those elements together. And then, to get across what he's trying to say, even if he's not, if, obviously he's verbose and sometimes he'll take 5 minutes to describe something that could have been done in one. And it's my
He'll
job.
do it with gusto.
That's right. Yeah, and to still capture that voice. And he was there every step of the way. He doesn't type very much. He's not sitting there writing or anything, but he's dictating everything, and we're going over it. And I'm asking questions, and he's clarifying. I'm sending him drafts, and he's sending me notes. So it's a very involved process.
When he said, "Okay, let's do it," or send me some pitch papers, some pitch pages. Well, first of all, when you sent those pitch pages, did you try to write in first person in his voice, or did you was it like, here's a plan for the book?
That was more of here's a plan for the book.
Okay. That would be hard to do. I
Well,
didn't know exactly. Yeah.
Had those discussions with him yet. So now I feel like I can write in his voice. And I also went through and I read pretty much everything he'd ever written. So I did feel like a good,
Wow.
all the nonfiction
Oh,
stuff.
the nonfiction, yeah, the movie
Yeah.
memories and all of those.
Yeah, and then his last couple of books. And I read his book about Leonard, which was actually really, really touching. And it's a beautiful little story. And of course, we talk a lot about Leonard and their falling out and how deeply upset he was about that. And they never got to make amends and all of that. So there's a lot of that in there as well.
It's such an odd story that I think there's a huge chunk of fandom, if not the world, that still is not aware of that. Because it was just the last year or so, year or two, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very sad, and mostly probably a couple of misunderstandings between old friends, and that's the thing. When you have a friend you've been friends with for 50 years, you do have spats from time to time, knowing that you'll just patch it up the next time you see each other. But in this case, it just didn't happen.
The clock ran out, and they didn't get to score again. I just had this flash. The way we were just talking about those two, and time, and really good friends who had their spats and things. I just flashed on Jefferson and Adams, which is American. Maybe that's beyond you.
No, I know the story.
They both, and they died on the same day. And they yeah. And I'm not trying to elevate Shatner and Nimoy to Adams and Jefferson status, but just that thing of two old friends who got crossways, except I think theirs lasted for 20 years and they got together as they were dying or something.
Well, yeah, they were rivals at the beginning, of course.
Right. Oh yeah. Bitter rival. The first great knockdown drag out. The reason we have political parties.
Right.
They ruined the notion that we could have this country without political parties. Anyway, that was an interesting turn for Star Trek with an Australian rooted guest. So those things are on the horizon, perking along. But back to your day job, writing. So directed one project, but I know you just finished another one.
I've now directed.
Tell us about that, because Marina is not the end of your Star Trek connections with.
That's true. Yeah. So Marina was in my first film, along with a couple of other great actors, Colin Ferguson, who everybody might remember as the star of Eureka, and Rebecca Lydiard, who I met when I was working on a show called Houdini and Doyle. She's a Canadian actress, and she's just wonderful. She was in the latest season of Fargo, so you should check her out. Then I directed a film, which I didn't write, called Black Bags, which is available. I think it's on Roku and a bunch of channels. You can get it for free now. And that starred Alicia Rulin from High School Musical and Laura Vandervoort, who people might know from Smallville and all of that. So that was a two-hander thriller, which was really great. And I just directed a film that I wrote, the first time I've directed in 3 years. And it's called 25 Miles to Normal. And it stars Lucas Bryant, who I met on Haven, Bruce Davison, Academy Award nominee, and a whole bunch, a raft of other stars, including Rachel Nichols, who did Star Trek with the J.J. Abrams film and was the star of Continuum, Michelle Hurd from Star Trek Picard, Garrett Wang is in the film as well. And these are just coincidences. My casting director recommended Michelle.
You didn't do a Star Trek movie.
No, I didn't. It just happened.
Yeah,
Rachel is a friend. Garrett's a friend. And when I realized I was going into production, I thought, I want him in this movie. I think he's perfect for this role. And as I say, Michelle is just somebody my casting director told me to literally go up and introduce myself to her when I was at the Star Trek convention promoting the book, and she was next door signing autographs, and Ricky Masler is her name. And she said, Michelle would be perfect for this role in your movie. And she's at the same convention you are. Go and introduce yourself. And I said, I don't know. She looks pretty intimidating at that autograph table. And she said, Wait till the line is clear. Go introduce herself. Tell her you've written a movie for her. So I did, and then the rest is kind of history.
Right. Where was it? Vegas, like last year?
This was earlier in the year. This was in San Francisco.
Oh, it was the same one where we.
Same one. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Oh, just that fast a turnaround, because that was fast. The
movie had been in development for a while, and then the strike put us off by about 6 to 12 months. So I was just waiting for the opportunity, and my producers were looking for the right state with the right tax incentive. So we wound up shooting it in Missouri, of all places. So yeah, we camped out there for about a month and just wrapped a few days ago.
What part of Missouri?
We were in order to get the tax credit, you had to shoot at least 25% of the movie in Kansas City, which we did. And then we shot the rest in a town about 45 minutes away called St. Joseph, which was really great.
Oh, okay. Well, St. Joseph, Missouri, the end of the Pony Express.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also where, what's his face? Killed by robbed banks. Jesse James.
Oh, Jesse James. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and they made Paper Moon there, which was 60 years ago or 50 years ago, and it's still their claim to fame in the town. They were so excited to have a movie come through because they said, we haven't had anything really that's been made here since Paper Moon, and we still talk about it. So please bring your movie to St. Joseph.
And, I was going to say, and before Paper Moon, it was the Pony Express. So they were, they had 100 years and then 50. What's the deets on when we can see it?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure yet. So I'm getting into editing next month, and then we'll take it around and see who wants a piece of it. But, it's a great story and a great cast.
Oh, okay.
It looked really, really great. So I'm using the word great a lot. But it was wonderful, and I'm sure we'll find a way for everybody to see it. We'll see who wants it, and it'll wind up somewhere. They always do.
Where it'll land. Well, and I'm saying that was a great cast, great lineup, a lot of Trek people. But Michelle has excited so many in the Trek world, and then to go back, and I had forgotten this, that she was it Law and Order or CSI?
Law and Order SVU back in the day,
yes. And she's right there. I was like, oh my God. And she's just a force of nature, but also her activism, and she stepped up. I say that she took the Armin Shimmerman seat on the negotiating committee at SAG. It's like there's somewhere in the SAG rules, there's always a Star Trek lead actor guaranteed a slot on the strike committee. But she was, so powerful in a leadership role there that people just love her. But she's still down to earth. So anyway, that sounds great. It sounds like you're excited to.
Yeah, I am. It's a really fun movie. It's a comedy, and I started in comedy. I originally, when I came to LA, I sold a comedy show that didn't get made. Then I was staffed on a CBS sitcom that didn't air. So I got out of comedy thinking this isn't for me, but this is me kind of going back to my roots, and it's pretty wacky. Gets into some interesting places, but there's a really beautiful story in there as well. And I told the crew, because the main character, played by Lucas Bryant, has several moments where he just drifts off into a fantasy where he believes he's the hero in many different contexts. So each of those fantasy sequences is shot like a different style of movie. One of them is a spaghetti western, one of them's an airplane drama, one of them's a hospital thing. And I said to the crew after one moment, I said, I don't know if this movie's any good, but I know no one's ever made anything like it. So we got back on for it.
Did you have a film noir?
Yeah, there was a bit of a noir thing. And then we also, his dad, played by Bruce Davison in the movie, is a former Michael Ironside type, big action star who has been reduced to doing ads for compression bandages called Compresso. So we went to this warehouse and we threw a bunch of junk in there and shot it like an infomercial. So that is a different style as well. So it's
you had too much fun. Too much fun, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a blast for everybody, because it's like making 5 or 6 movies in one.
It's like it's like a Star Trek time shattered type episode meets Walter Mitty meets.
That's right, very much so.
Down the line, yeah. Well, listen, Josh, this has been great. I wasn't expecting that. We met, we talked about the book, and then it was only later on I made the connection to the movie that I'd seen, because I had alerts for Star Trek people, and Michelle picked it up. So good luck with that. I don't mean, wait, that sounded horrible. Good luck with that.
No, I know what you're saying.
We're all going to be watching to see where that lands. And meanwhile, so To Boldly Go is from Atria, which is a Simon & Schuster.
Schuster, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll have those with me. I'm coming to the convention. I've got a table because I'm doing a little
STLV. We're talking.
Yes,
Vegas.
Yes, in a couple of weeks. So Paul Lynch, who's a Star Trek director, he did 5 Next Gens and 5 DS9s, but he also did everything back then. He did Moonlighting, Sliders, Xena, Due South. He did every show you can imagine in that era. and he's a mentor of mine. So we actually are doing a Q&A together, and we have an autograph table together. So he'll be there to sign anything anybody wants. We're bringing a bunch of the scripts he directed for Star Trek. I'll have copies of the book in hardcover and softcover and a couple of things. So by all means, come down, pick up a copy, ask us 1,000 questions. We're not in high demand, so we'll just talk to you.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be surprised sometimes. It's a big crowd and yeah, a lot of faces. Well, I hadn't heard back from him, but I reached out to Paul. So
yeah, he's not great with computers, but don't worry, he'll get back to you.
Well, I know in a couple of weeks I'll be in his face and he won't turn me down.
No, he knows he's got his appointments. I wrote them down for him. I had lunch with him the other day. He pulled out a pad and pencil. He said, "This is my iPad."
I can do it. Social media came in and he was all over it. And then I think there was a time 5-8 years ago when I don't know what was going on, maybe some of his staff or whatever. And it felt like he had some wrong feet forward on a few things. And I know, maybe climaxed with the one where he said something about, it was a comment on the current Treks. Sounding negative, like, oh, Gene Roddenberry would be turning over in his grave, and everybody took that as he was condemning all the modern Treks. And I think there was a moment in the last year where somebody actually had a chance in the right vein to ask him about that, and he was totally unaware of the push. He said he was totally unaware of the pushback, and that he didn't mean anything. He just meant he'll be turning in his grave because of the way TV and commercialism and streaming and the big networks and the tech guys running. It had nothing to do with the content of the shows. It was just the situation. I mean, so I
did
and
hear
I
about
think
that.
Since then people woke up and said, "Oh my God, the man is 90." And I think that's turned into a kind of a reverence, and everyone, no, we need to keep him going, you know. So did any of that come through in your discussions?
Yeah, I mean, I asked him about that, and the truth is, he doesn't have time to watch any of this stuff. He hates watching himself, so he rarely watched the original series. He hasn't seen much of anything. He's too busy to watch it a lot of the time. I think it's exactly what you were talking about, the streaming world and all of that. Gene wouldn't know what to make of that, I think, is what he was going with. Because he doesn't have anything against. He's happy for Star Trek to keep going. There was this one instance when
he's still getting a trickle of money in from anything. So.
Well, from the movies, they didn't make anything from the original show. Residuals didn't exist back then, so that's.
No, I mean I thought of the franchise. He got to a point where he had a tiny that ended with the original movies. It didn't extend to next gen and everything.
No, I don't think so.
Just as he's not in them and associated with them, aside from just being in the ownership pipeline.
No,
okay,
even the Roddenberrys didn't make as much money as you would think because Paramount basically owned the show by then. But I do know that when it came to there was this, they did a presentation, this live presentation with some of the captains, and he was standing on his mark reading the teleprompter, and they had rehearsed it. And for the teleprompter, the only bit that came up was his bit. So when his bit comes up, he's supposed to say it. When his bit is over, the teleprompter goes blank and they go to the next person. And then what happened when they did it, and it was live, is his bit comes up, he does his bit, and more text starts coming up. And so he goes, "Oh shit, I'm live. I should say this." But it wasn't meant for him. They put it on his teleprompter by mistake. It was
one of the others.
Martin Green. And he couldn't get in touch with her afterwards. And I was able to tell a couple of people. I told Elias Tufexis and I told Anthony Rapp when I saw him. I said, and I told Michelle, I said, please, if you can get through to her. It was an accident. He felt mortified by it. He wasn't trying to steal anybody's lines. But I think he's very misunderstood. You know, people have had experiences with him where he wasn't paying attention. He's got a real tunnel vision. And I think it's like those people who read as much and do as much as him. They don't have all of the social niceties. He talks about that at some point in the book. He says, I don't have all the Legos. So sometimes people have said that I was rude to them. I didn't even remember meeting them. And he learned that from Nichelle when he did Star Trek Memories. And he got all of his interview material. And she said, wait, we're not done. He said, we're not? She said, I have to tell you why we all hate you. He was totally blown away because he just didn't process it. And so I think that's why a lot of people have perhaps a misunderstanding of what he's really like. He's actually an incredibly warm person, but you can imagine when you deal with thousands of people every day, there's only so much you can keep up with, and that's for the the ones of us who don't have all of those burdens.
I think there's thousands of people every day who they don't want a piece of him, they just want a micro piece of him, and still that's overwhelming. Yeah. Just they're 5 minutes at the line in the autograph, and that's the highlight of their life. And if he's in a bad mood, if he's cranky or he has gas or whatever just happened, or somebody brought him the wrong food, or whatever, and you can't help but be that way. And
I'll tell you one.
Yeah.
He was doing autographs once, because I remember the story was relayed to me, and he had arrived late. So when he was doing the autographs, he was kind of doing this. And somebody had to say, Bill, you gotta look up. He said, but I'm running late. And that, like, he couldn't process the two things. It's like, I've got to get these done. They're going to whisk me back to this room by this time. And he's like, I'll try. But he was focused on, you have to sign 4,000 autographs, and instead of doing it in 60 minutes, you have to do it in 40 minutes. So he was just signing. He doesn't have the Legos, like he said, you know?
Well, listen, it was a really, I probably got about a fourth of this in the last couple of days in amongst my home remodel project, but it reads, I say it reads so easy, and that's a compliment, and it reads in his voice. So you all were a winning combination, even having to go remotely. Maybe even working remotely was a bonus. Do you think? Did it help focus, or would you have
certainly made it easier to just record everything and then
right.
and get it transcribed? But the thing is, what's so interesting is, yeah, I think it did, because it cuts down on a lot of the niceties. You know, you don't have to do any of the, hey, Bill, how are you? You know, oh, you know, how are the kids? Whatever.
Can I get you some coffee? Do you want a drink? Do you what? Yeah.
Yeah, and I tell you, he comes prepared to work. So I remember distinctly, at first we were doing them in sort of 1 hour blocks, but then we got the book deal, and they said, can you get it to us by January 15th, which was a few months earlier than we expected. And we said, sure we can. Half of it's already written, right? And it wasn't. So we started doing these 2 hour blocks, and I would assign an hour to each topic. And so one day we were going to do an hour on music, and then we were going to do an hour on maybe it was animals or something like that. And so he said, okay, Josh, what are we working on today? And I said, okay, in the first hour, we're going to talk about music. And in the second hour, and before I could get the sentence out, he said, okay, music. When I grew up, there was no music in my house. We didn't have a record player. My father, who worked 5.5 days a week in the garment district, would come home on a Saturday afternoon, and he would tune the radio to whichever station had the New York Metropolitan Opera. And he would sit on the lounge and close his eyes and listen to the music. And I wondered, what were they singing about? And like, it just goes. So it definitely made things more efficient from that point of view. I see Dave.
You were channeling him really well right there. And I thought, I wonder what the boy.
I know everybody does a Shatner, right? And the truth is, we all do an exaggerated version of it. It's like everybody does an exaggerated version of Nixon, like Nixon doing, you know, it wasn't quite, but we all do it. I see Dave just attesting to that he does have people do have tunnel vision. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you get good moments and you get bad. It's just like anybody else, except he happens to be on display when it happens.
I think up until just a few years ago, it was all about here's a long life, here's a career. Lots of people want to see him. People want to, you know, but I think the last few years people went, oh, and then on top of all that, he's 90 plus 90 now. So I just think that's helped filter even more. It's amazing that he's still rolling and going, you know.
He's always doing something.
Someone's doing that wind
up. Absolutely.
Listen, well, I will let you go for real. This has been great. So good luck with the book. We will see you in Vegas. Everybody, a lot of folks hit Vegas bound.
Come up and say hi.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And we'll all be waiting. Maybe in 2 weeks we'll have some news about 25 miles from normal. But whenever it lands,
probably too soon for news. But at least it's in the can, as they say, which is great.
That's good.
And
listen, Josh,
if you see Garrett, if you see Michelle, feel free to ask them about it. I'm sure they have stories. It was a really fun time.
I'm sure, especially Michelle would be lovely, and Garrett would might walk up to me and say, "Hey, Larry, have you heard?"
He probably will.
Garrett's Garrett. Anyway, thanks for joining us today. Good luck with everything.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you soon. A lot of folks will be seeing you soon, and take care, man. Happy travels.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be there, but I think I arrive late Thursday night. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll be there.
Okay. I'm just looking here last. There we go. Thank yous and things. Okay. And then this will be up pretty quick, and it'll be there.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. All right, everybody. It's been funny. Josh and I literally met at the San Francisco Creation a couple of months ago, and but look how fast life is moving along. So why don't we just end it there, everybody? It's been so great to have you with us today. It's great to have you watching us later on YouTube. And I'll just remind everyone, first off, that my big thanks are to all of our Patreon folk, our TTL Club. Hey, that is, thank you, Diana. Diana Hopkins, Jesse of Crusher Convo. Lawrence Todd, Halbert Gun Johnson, Justin Porteous, Glinda Bruton, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Comedy Forecast, Andrew Jazimski, Chris Jiggins, and Keith Rombach. And our live wires, Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Alan Hoensi, Dave Gregory, Greg Wickstrom, and Casey Shafsky. And you know what? I have not updated the sign, but a thank you to James Kerwin. Here's up on the $5 ones too. I say that we have a very simple Patreon. I just appreciate what everybody can throw in on this level, patreon.com/Trekland Live. It's helping us just grow here along with Trekland Tuesdays. Of course, I say, if you really want to jump in the deep end with us, just join Portal every month. It's your mini-con all year long. A lot of you heard me there. I'm fishing for Paul to have him be one of our guests. Backstage creatives, because the actors, you're going to hear from them. They're going to be followed for the end of time. But so much about the way Star Trek is. It's Portal 47, as we say, is for all the Star Trek fans who have no idea how much Star Trek they have no idea about. There we go. And of course, it's hot now. You're vacationing, but as the year cools, any time of year here in SoCal is a great time to take your Trekland Trek, your customized away mission. We'll work it out in advance, and then I'll be your concierge for the day, driving, picking you up hotel to hotel with the information, with the contact. We will wrangle your cosplay, wrangle your stuffed animals, maybe your live animals, whatever you need. We'll have an awesome day, a 6-hour day, 4 stops that you choose with me helping. TreklandTreks.com. Whenever you're planning or maybe not planning to be in LA and you just make a special trip, that would be awesome. Of course, it's Tuesday as we record this, and it's time for another Trek Files from Roddenberry. Our Trek Files this week, we're back with David Gerald, who had his ups and downs with Star Trek, sadly didn't leave on the best foot, but then along came Trials and Tribulations on DS9. This week, we're looking at, we have a call sheet from DS9 from Tribulations, but it's David talking about kind of the redemption, good taste in his mouth that he got from Tribbles. He'd been a recent guest, and this is kind of the wrap-up of that arc. So would love for you to take a look. We have our new home on Memory Alpha. You can go to thetrekfiles.com, and there's a central hub where you've got the document and the podcast player right there, and then the deep links back into Memory Alpha. Our Facebook page, and of course, all your podcast places are all there. This is the best place to get it all in one. There you go. And of course, if you're hunting me down, Twitter, X, whatever it is this month, Larry Nemecek's Trekland here on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to get the Instagram. And also, always, YouTube. We need the numbers. We got in the game late. So I appreciate it when you like and subscribe. Share Second Opinion. Share Cadet Alice. Everything we do, I appreciate it so much. And Portal47.net is the home for Portal 47 if you're not just going to everything LarryNemecek.com. If you're watching us later on YouTube, please do all the things, and maybe you can join us someday live on Tuesday. We've got the cons, bam, bam, coming up the next couple of weeks, so I'll be there for the full bore effect. Come by and see us. Check out my site, the blogs, and the socials for where we'll be doing, what we're doing, and all of that good stuff. So I think we'll call it today, everybody. Hey, whatever's going on, please stay healthy, do all the things, stay woke, check your sources. It's going to get thick. And Trek well, everybody.